Hey everybody, welcome to the Thursday edition of Southern Sports Gumbo. We're going to be diving into the LSU Texas A&M game a little bit more. Then we're going to roll into our picks of the week, talk a little bit of high school football, and then finish up with a national champion draft. We're each going to pick four teams that we think have a chance to bring a title to their university this year. Let's jump straight into the LSU Texas A&M game. Kevin, want to get us started on LSU here?
Yeah, so I want to just take the approach of what is it going to take for LSU to win this football game, and there's three factors that I think LSU's got to execute on, and then obviously play with extreme energy and the crowd. So first thing is going to be third down efficiency on offense. Texas A&M is on third downs is only giving up 22% of third down efficiency. So first and second down has to mean more for LSU than any game they've played this year. You're not going to get third and eights and third and tens against Texas A&M, and they've got to possess the football. And by that I mean time of possession has to matter to LSU in this football game. Last week, they Vanderbilt had it for 38 minutes and they had it for 22. That's going to be a recipe for defeat. First and second down is going to be more important than it has been all season. The running game's got to be there. The last 2 weeks, LSU's averaged running the ball for 6 yards a carry. So they have ran it better. So Harlem Berry, Durham, Caden Durham, those guys are going to be important. And Joe Sloan's got to call his best game of the year. Probably did call his best game of the year against Vanderbilt where we scored 5 of the first 6 possessions. He's got to call his best game of the year this Saturday on first and second down to create third and four, third and five, third and manageable situations where he can hit, the short passing game with Anderson and Green can come into play. I'll also say this: A&M's weakness is in their safeties. So throwing the ball over the middle of the field, Aaron Anderson's thrived in that area of the field in his career. Green, Trades Green, the middle of the field. I hope we see LSU attack the middle of the field more against A&M to be successful in the passing game. So, but first thing, for LSU to win is they got to be successful on third down. Second thing, their defense has to get back to the way they played the first 3 games of the year. Very fundamentally sound, where they execute. Everybody's in position like they were against Clemson, Louisiana Tech, and Florida. If we go back to those games, that was all the talk was about how well positioned they were. Well, we're coming off the game that they were so out of position that Pavia just kept taking advantage of that. And so I'm sure Baker and look, the defense has got a lot of prideful guys with both the Weeks brothers, with Halsey, with Pyburn, Gooden, those guys, Mansard and Lane, who he continues to play well. I just bring all those guys' names up because there's a lot of pride on that defense, and I think Blake Baker is, he's obviously going to get them back in the mindset. And I'll even throw Harold Perkins in there, who probably had the worst game that he's had at LSU. So I think you're going to see that group play with more energy, more passion, more discipline this week. They have to. And on the second part on that defensive thing that I think has to be in play for this weekend, I think LSU has to win the turnover margin by 2. So third down efficiency, defense has to be sound, and they have to win the turnover margin by 2, which means they really can't make turnovers on offense, and they got to create 2 on defense. I do think their defense can do that. I honestly expect their defense to get an interception this week. I think this will be by far the best secondary that Texas A&M has played. That also being said, Texas A&M is going to put the best wide receiver number 1 and wide receiver number 2 on the field against LSU this week in KC Concepcion and Mario Craver. So it is going to be a test for LSU's defensive backs. Mansour Delane I totally believe that he's up to the challenge, though. I expect him to take Concepcion a lot. And I'll be honest, I know Concepcion's really good, but I just watching Delane this year, he just does not give up pass receptions. So I think he'll win that battle. Not saying Concepcion will get some catches, but I think he will. And I think that's going to cause A&M to throw the ball in some different spots, and a guy like Halsey or Cooley can get an interception possibly over the middle or on the opposite side of the field. I really expect Pickett. DJ Pickett's playing a lot more. He's played over 40 plays the last 2 games. So I really expect him to be cornerback number 2 this week with Woodland playing some and being in the nickel. And we may even see all three of those guys play a little bit more. And Perkins may come off the field some on passing downs, or they might drop him down at defensive end to get some pressures. I mean, I could see LSU doing that because when you look at the total sacks that LSU has on the year, it's not very high. So I could see them dropping Perkins in kind of a DN role to get pressure off the edge, bringing Woodland on the field to play nickel this week. But I think Pickett will be your cornerback number 2, and they'll match him up with Craver a lot. And I really think this is be the week that Pickett gets an interception. So that's the first two things. The third thing I'm going to say is LSU has to win the special teams battle. So that means they got to get a return either on a kickoff, punts, and they got to be solid in the kicking and the punting game. I like LSU's advantage in the punting game. Chadwick's been awesome all year. Punting part of this, I think they'll win that piece. Return game, you got some really good returners on both sides in this game. Varian Brown on kickoffs, and then Terry Bussey on kickoffs for A&M. And then punt returns, Xavion Thomas against Casey Concepcion for A&M. So the coverage units are going to have to be good on both sides. I think Xavion will get a good return this week. And I give him the advantage in the punt game strictly because I think Chadwick can get more hang time for LSU to be more effective in the coverage piece. So, and then, I think both kickers are good, so I think that part. But I give advantage to LSU in the punt return game simply because of the punters. So special teams, LSU's got to win that. Turnover margin and third down efficiency, they have to be good. If they're at 30-35% on third downs, it's going to be a long night. So what's your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a few thoughts on what A&M needs to do not to lose this game. And then I want us to wrap up with breaking down position by position, seeing who has the edge. So to get started, the Texas A&M offense, in the game against Auburn, they started to play not to lose that game, which really hindered them because of how good the Auburn defense was. They tried to just not make mistakes and just run the ball, throw, 3-4 yard passes. If they do that, I feel like LSU significantly increases their chances to win the game. If I'm Colin Klein, I'm letting Marcel Reed do his thing. I'm running with my running backs and Reuben Owens and E.J. Smith. I think they need to play this game to win. If Marcel Reed throws an interception and I'm Colin Klein, I'm okay with one turnover. Because like you mentioned, LSU probably needs to win this battle by 2 turnovers. And if you're Texas A&M, you saw Garrett Nussmeier throw an interception to your defensive line last year, essentially. So I think A&M's defense has to love the position they're in. Little bit of LSU news, though. It was announced today that Carius Kern is going to be starting at tackle over DJ Chester, and he's starting for the injured Tyree Adams. So, I do think Carius Kern has a higher upside than DJ Chester, but if I'm Texas A&M defense, you've got to go after him early. You're probably going to want to have Cassius Howell going up against Carius Kern to start things off. So I think if Texas A&M can play their game, go out and, they pass the ball well, but it all starts with some of their running game, whether it's Marcel Reed or the running backs. So if they can open up that pass game a little bit, I think that's the key for A&M to win this. I do want to mention Ashton Bethel Roman, who's kind of emerged as of last week as wide receiver 3 for Texas A&M. I think he had 4 catches, a touchdown, and 83 yards for Texas A&M. And then you still have Terry Bussey, and then the 2 guys in KC Concepcion and Mario Craver. I do think that if we're just talking DJ Pickett and we're just talking Mansour Delane, LSU's got the edge, even with as talented as Craver and Concepcion are concerned. But if they can get the passing game going with wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4, I don't know who covers them. You'll have some situations where Harold Perkins may have to cover one of them. You'll have AJ Halsey probably playing a little bit of coverage. You'll have PJ Woodland in there some. I don't know if any of those guys can, stop the other two guys for A&M in the passing game. So one thing that I really like about Texas A&M, and that's Coach Tommy Moffitt. These guys are going to be ready to play from a physicality standpoint this week. All since their last game against Arkansas, Mike Elko has really challenged his defense. And he's mentioned in his press conference earlier in the week, if we don't fix our own issues, we won't stop anybody. And, hearing some of the players talk, like that message was received pretty loud and clear. A&M at some point is going to have to either win games or sit down. And I know they're undefeated right now, but they always start off hot every year and then they dwindle down and they're 8-4 when it's all said and done. So I think this game, as much as it means for LSU, back against the wall, you're playing at night in Tiger Stadium, Death Valley, one of the most electric environments in all of college football. This game means a heck of a lot to Texas A&M too. You don't think Coach Tommy Moffitt's had this one circled on his calendar a little bit, coming back home to Baton Rouge, where he lived for a really long time, going up against his former team, the head coach who decided not to retain him? I worry if LSU's physicality can last 4 quarters against this Texas A&M team. So kind of to wrap that all up, Texas A&M just plays their brand of offense and doesn't try to get conservative and try to shorten the game. I think they're fine. I think they do want to create a turnover on defense, something they've struggled with. And if they're going to right the ship on defense, this is a good game to get it going for them. So really excited to see this game, regardless of how it ends up. I know we'll talk about that a little more when we get to the pick side. But now I want us to break down each position and, which team does it favor. So let's start with the quarterback position. I think it favors Texas A&M. Marcel Reed has significantly improved as a passer this year. He still has the dual threat ability. So couple that with the poor offensive line play, which I believe hinders Garrett Nussmeier a little bit. I'm rolling with Marcel Reed in this one. Who do you have, Kevin?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with Reed. If they play this game 7 times out of 10, Reed is going to get you the better stats. I will say this though, we do have the ceiling with Nuss, and we've not seen Nuss play his highest ceiling game yet. So I'm going to go with Reed because he's going to give you the better diversity. He can run the ball, he can throw the ball, both, and completes a high percentage of his passes also. But I'm not going to rule out the fact that this could be a game where Nuss is really dialed in and he's focused. And if we have a well called game, this could be a game where he could elevate his ceiling and play really well. Simply because Texas A&M safeties are very vulnerable. That is the weakest part of that defense. So, do we have some success throwing the ball and getting the ball? I don't want to say just downfield because it's yes, you can do that, but if they're sitting back too deep safety, can we make good decisions throwing the ball? And can Nuss be really on his best game? But yeah, I would go with Reed. Which position we go in next?
We're going to go running back, and Le'Veon Moss is out for Texas A&M, so Reuben Owens is going to be their lead back, averaging about 5.7 yards a carry. And then you've got EJ Smith and Amari Daniels. EJ Smith got a few more of the carries last week. He's averaging 6 yards a carry. And then you go to LSU and you've got Caden Durham, followed by Harlem Berry and Juwan Johnson on the LSU side. The easy answer for me here is take Texas A&M run game. And while I think it's more efficient and better, so I'm going to take them for that reason, I like the 1-2 punch of Caden Durham and Harlem Berry more than I like the 1-2 punch of Reuben Owens and EJ Smith. I am going to give A&M the edge here just because they've been really good this year. But if I was building a team, I would probably take the LSU running back room from a talent level over A&M's. But with what's been put on the field this year, I got to roll A&M. What do you have?
Yeah, so to me, the interesting point in this game is, or with the running back position, is we saw Harlem Berry come out against Vandy and play early and get carries early in the game. Are we going to see this and a real commitment to him? Because he's definitely different from an athletic standpoint and what he can do. And his speed just offers a different element that LSU does not have with anybody else. Caden Durham's a great one cut back, and he's had a little bit, of an ankle injury, so like he couldn't pull away and get that one in the end zone when he broke free last week. And Durham still has that ability. I'm like I'm going to favor A&M's running backs, but I really want to see LSU commit to Berry and Durham in that backfield. And again, first and second down are going to be important. So, I mean, I would love to see both those guys get 15 carries apiece, one maybe 17, one 13, something like that. And I just want to see them stick with those two guys. They offer the best ability in the running game. Juwan Johnson, great team player. He's moved around, so I don't want to take anything away from him. But it is clear the best two running backs for LSU are Barry and Durrell, hands down. No, no, and we've heard all the stuff about Barry's got to learn how to pass block. Well, he had the best pass block example last week where he depleted a Vandy pass rusher of any running back this year. So don't really want to hear that excuse anymore. Barry and Durham got to play. They got to play 90% of this game. And Barry's got to get more than, 8 carries. He's got to get 12, 13, 14 carries because if he does, I think he can bust one. He showed speed. He slipped on a run last weekend that if he would have kept his feet, he was headed to the outside off tackle. He would have picked up 15, 20, and he might have got more. So he's got to be a part of this. I like the ceiling on Barry and Durham because I like what Barry could do. But again, if you just want the consistency piece and where they've been, definitely Texas A&M. And last thing I'll say here is I do think A&M's defense can be attacked at the defensive tackle position. I think we can. We're not going to win that battle all night, but I think we can go from guard to guard and be effective.
Yeah, I do too. I think there's got to be creativity in those play calls, which that's something I'm not confident in LSU right now
Nope.
with creating those play calls. But teams can definitely get some running game going against Texas A&M. So that brings us to the wide receivers and the tight ends. I'm grouping these two together because they're both pass catchers. And I'm going to start with the LSU Tigers. I think clear advantage in the tight end room for LSU with Trey Green. I think he may be, from a talent level, the best there is in the country. If he would be utilized 100% correctly and not lined up wide as much as he is in the games, I think he would be even more effective. And then, you got Aaron Anderson, you got Varian Brown, you got Xavion Thomas, you got Kyle Parker. All those guys have, except Anderson, have at least one touchdown score. On the wide receiver side, I still have to roll with Texas A&M because of how strong their number one and number two are. You look at Mario Craver and KC Concepcion, they've combined for 69 catches, 170 yards and 10 touchdowns. That's an elite duo right there. So I'm going to give LSU 1 point for tight end room and A&M 1 for wide receiver room. What do you think, Kevin?
The big thing to me is how healthy is Aaron Anderson this week? And again, what does LSU do with their groupings of wide receivers? So, I mean, let's just call it like it is. Barry and Brown's had a lot of drops this year, right? So, are we going to see Aaron Anderson, Kyle Parker, Xavion Thomas as the top three wide receivers. That's what I would like to see, along with Trades, like you referenced. I think if LSU will play those three guys and Trades, and that's your four pass catchers, I give the advantage to LSU. If you play Brown a lot, go to him a lot, and he drops the ball, then obviously that swings the wide receiver room over to A. To your point, Green's out by far the better tight end. So, that kind of splits that. But I would really like to, and look, I understand what Brown can give you. And I think going back to the LSU running game, I think you got to see Thomas and Brown get some carries on some stretch plays, reverse plays. Not a lot, but between the two of them, 5 carries to create some diversity in that running game. So I'm good if you play Brown in that role and maybe throw it to him a couple times. But last week we threw the ball to Aaron Anderson one time, and we went into that game and we said we've got to make Barry and Brown a principal part of the offense. And they went at him, and he had 2 more drops. And so I think we got to look at it and say, okay, who are our best? And don't predetermine just because you want to get someone involved, because we've done that same thing with Hilton. We if you drop the ball, then we got to go with the guys that are the best. And to me, our best receivers this year have been Parker, Xavion Thomas, and Aaron Anderson. So I want to see him go with those three guys. And I think if they do, because you've got three, I think that supersedes A&M. Anderson and Concepcion are very close. Concepcion a little advantage there, but they're very similar. Craver is going to be better than LSU's number two, but to me, Parker could be like with a three slot there. I think he could be way ahead of what A&M offers in that third slot, and then with Trades. So it's interesting, but it's a close position. So that leaves us one position on offense. So I know that's the offensive line. So what you got on that one?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna lean LSU here. No, I'm only leaning LSU and sacks given up.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, if you paired the LSU O line up to all 36 other schools in the nation, they'd be outside of the top 100. So I don't even really want to talk about this
Yeah.
position much. Personally, I'm taking A&M here.
Oh, yeah, this was not even close. You just gotta hope that LSU schemes things well like we've talked about, and that their line plays their best game of the year. They have to. Kern's an interesting thing to me. He played well against Ole Miss, played solid. That's the right word to put it. Against Ole Miss, he was better than any game Weston Davis has played at right tackle. Adams has not been bad on the year, but I'm curious to see. I think he's a competitor. So I'm curious to see how Kern plays. I don't think he's going to, go out there and be the best last tackle that has ever played the game. But I think he's going to compete hard, and I'm looking forward to see what he gets.
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me is, and we'll move into defense in a second, but Cassius Howell, TJ Searcy, and Dayon Hayes at the defensive end position for A&M. Yeah, I know he played a lot in the Ole Miss game, but he didn't face three guys like those in that game.
Howell's leading the SEC in sacks with 8.5. So, um, what is going to be interesting is who are they going to put on Weston Davis's side? Because you got to think they're going to attack him. And Hayes and Howell both can get after the quarterback.
Yeah, Days is sitting at 3.5 sacks himself in kind of a rotational role as a pass rusher. So yeah, they've got some talent. So while we're talking about the Texas A&M defensive ends, I do want to break the DN position away from D line for this topic. I like Jack Pyburn a lot. I think he plays with a lot of heart and, really, really good run specialist. I've been a little disappointed in Patrick Payton this year from a pass rushing standpoint. He does have quite a few hurries, but only sitting at, I think, 1 sack on the year. So I am going to give A&M the edge at defensive end because of how well Howell, Searcy, Hayes are playing right now. What do you think of this position group?
So I think if you break it up against the pass, I think A&M's better. I think if you break it up against the run, I think LSU has the better defensive ends in the running game. So, the interesting part here is A&M wants to run the ball. and LSU's defense needs to, they need to be more effective against the run. On the same side of that, LSU is going to throw the ball more than 50% of the time. So the interesting part of this game is the strengths of the other team's DNs match what the offenses want to do. What defensive ends are going to be more effective is, I guess, how I would break this down. So I like A&M's ends probably a little better, but I think LSU's defensive ends have a chance to be more effective with Pyburn's ability to set the edge in the running game and how they're going to parallel with LSU's defensive tackles. So I think that could be interesting. And Hal, even though he's a very good rusher, he gets out of his running lanes a lot. And that, Arkansas ran for 260 last week, and Green ran for about 122 if you take the sack yardage out. And a lot of that was when Hal would get out of his rushing lane, so Green would take off. Now I don't expect us to take off too much, so I don't expect that there. But I just think, from a discipline standpoint, LSU might be better. Jamari Butler is also expected to be back in this game, and I think LSU needs that third defensive end. I think there was a lot of fatigue last week where, Pyburn had to play a majority of the snaps. Dylan Carpenter's getting better, but they really can't go past him. CJ Jackson played a little bit last week, but wasn't really very effective. So it's good for LSU to get Butler back.
So then we can move over to the defensive line. I'm going to let you take this one first.
Yeah, so if Gooden plays, and it's looking like he is, I just looked at the availability report. That can change. If you have Gooden along with McKinley, Bro, and the things, that the combination of things and the depth that LSU has at defensive tackle, I like their tackles better than Hicks and the other guys that A&M has. I think the potential there and what Kyle Williams has done, if Gooden plays, he's very disruptive. So I would take LSU's defensive tackles here. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when you account for depth specifically, like I think Albert Regis is playing really good football this season, and DJ Hicks has been good. But we've got four or five guys who can rotate in on the defensive line at LSU. So when you factor in that depth side, I give LSU the edge on defensive line. That's why I wanted to really separate the DNs and the defensive line. So now we move to linebackers. And it looks like LSU is going to be without Whit Weeks again this week. And if you look at that Vanderbilt game, you had Harold Perkins playing a lot more kind of a linebacker style role. West Weeks plays with a lot of intensity. And then you've got Devon Keys, who I think is still kind of learning the defense a little bit at times, especially in the coverage game. So those are going to be the three primary linebackers for LSU. Then you flip over, you've got Terrion York, Damian Sanford, and you've got Scooby Williams, who are going to be your top three backs. I'm going to throw Jordan Lockhart in there a little bit. He's been getting some more rotation. And, Damian Sanford has 2.5 sacks. Terrion York has 1. They both have, a couple forced fumbles and fumble recoveries between the two of them. Without Whit Weeks, I lean Texas A&M in the linebacker position. I think if Whit Weeks is playing, it's a different conversation, but I don't think you have a true leader on your linebacker room without Whit playing. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, and, you mentioned depth, and we talked depth at defensive tackle. I think that gives A&M the advantage here. Is just the overall depth. You have you have West Weeks, and you have Keys. Those guys have to be able to play the entire game, and I'm just really interested to see how Perkins is going to play in this game too, because he was an absolute liability last weekend. So let's see how he plays. But I'm going to go with A&M's linebackers. York has been really good this year, and again, they've got 4 or 5 guys that can play with their depth. Yeah, it goes to A&M.
And then you go to the cornerback room. One more note before we move to cornerbacks. Blake Baker, please do not give Harold Perkins the green dot on his helmet to be your
No.
quarterback of the defense this week. Give it to West Weeks. Give it to a safety. Give it to somebody else this week. So I'll get off of that now. And then we go to the cornerback room. I don't think Texas A&M is bad in the cornerback room. I think there are some vulnerabilities here, but I'm rolling with LSU because of Mansour Delane and freshman DJ Pickett, and I like PJ Woodland a lot. But I think Mansour Delane, regardless of who's the number 2 and number 3 guy at LSU, he almost carries the room by himself. And that's not to discredit Pickett or Woodland at all. That is just how good of a cornerback he is. So I roll with LSU here. What do you have, Kevin?
Yeah, same way. I roll with LSU, and it's just because of how good their cornerbacks are, and you got 3 deep, there. I think with Pickett, Delane, and Woodland, those 3 all may be better than cornerback 1 at A&M, and again, that is not to slight A&M. Mansour Delane is the best cornerback LSU has had since Stingley, and people will disagree with me that are LSU fans when I say this, but if you watched him play, like, if you at a game, you're there in person, because you don't see it on TV. I'm telling you, he takes his guy out. I'm not so sure he's not having a better season than Stingley had, and I know that's saying a lot, but I'm just telling you, he takes his guy out. I've said he's the best cornerback in college football, and I'll stand by that. And then when you go over there to Pickett, Pickett has been coming on, and he's grading out higher in games. I think the highest 2 graded players in PFF on the defense last weekend were Pickett and Delane. And so I think Pickett is playing really at a high level too. So I just think LSU's cornerbacks are the elite and best part of their defense, and all 3 of those guys can play. And again, I hope that this week when we are in 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, or longer distance, that we see Woodland in at nickel and the other 2 guys at corner, and we drop Perkins down and use him as a pass rusher, take a D tackle out, something like that. Slide Pyburn in and use him as a pass rusher. I don't. Vanderbilt really took advantage. Both teams. Vanderbilt. So Perkins played every snap against Vanderbilt, no miss, and both of those teams really took advantage of him in the passing game. Vanderbilt did with the tight ends. So I hope when it gets 3rd and long, drop him down where he's effective, let him rush the passer from a passing game standpoint. Put those other 3 guys in for coverage and let's go.
So that brings us to the safety room. Texas A&M is without Bryce Anderson for I think the 3rd straight week. He got banged up and actually had to go to the hospital after a game a few weeks back. Without him, they still have Marcus Radcliffe. So they do have a talented one. Outside of him, they really don't have much at that safety position. And you go over to LSU, and you've got AJ Halsey, you've got Tamarcus Cooley, you've got Deshaun Spears, who's playing well in the rotation. So I give LSU the nod here for the AJ Halsey talent level and the overall depth. So I give LSU the entire defensive backs in this game for an edge. What do you have on safeties, Kevin?
Yeah, totally agree. LSU. Halsey's one of the best safeties in the SEC. You mentioned the green dot. I wouldn't mind if Westweek's had it, but if it was me, I'm giving it to Halsey because he's got the best instincts and seems to understand the flow of the game better than any defensive player that LSU has. He's always in the right position, and he had a great interception in that Florida game. I think you could see that again this week. Now Cooley's been very effective with turnovers. Sometimes he's given up some plays in coverage. LSU safety play by far better because this is the weakest part of A&M's team is their safety. So I think again secondary LSU really has the advantage here. There's like offensive line A&M strong advantage, secondary LSU strong advantage. So that's where LSU's got to win. So they got to win the coverage part, and they got to get a couple turnovers there.
Yeah, an interesting fact when you break down the front 7, and we gave A&M the nod in linebacker and defensive end, LSU the nod in defensive tackle. Texas A&M front 7 has caused 24 and a half sacks this season. So that's what, almost 4 a game they're averaging. So that's going to be a key for LSU is to for Garrett Nussmeier. He's got to get rid of the ball quick and maybe even quicker than usual. You know, he already doesn't have a lot of time with the poor offensive line play, but this is going to be a whole nother level. And, you know, I love the play that Trades Green scored on and the play Xavion Thomas scored on. Now, I don't love the pass that was thrown up to Xavion Thomas there for a few yards, but the catch and run was great. So I think you're going to have to do a lot of those plays where it's an easy drag or a slant. We can't have 4 guys running 15 yards down the field in this game if you're LSU. That's a recipe for Nussmeier to get hit 25 times in this game if you're running a lot of long passes because you just won't have the time. You've got to trust your guys if you're LSU at the receiver room and the tight end room to make plays in this one.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's where I think Anderson, Parker, and Thomas have gotta be your most effective receivers because you are gonna have to win with some slants and some things over the middle with Green. One last thing that we haven't touched on that we talked about before we hopped on is the weather and the factor that that can play this week. As the game gets further along, that rain factor. There's rain in the forecast, and as you get into the night, that rain could get heavy. So it's just something to watch as we go along because that can also affect the crowd too. So that's just something to look at.
And one last category, this isn't a position group, but this is conditioning and physicality. Who do you lean in this for this one, Kevin?
Physicality is absolutely to Texas A&M. And if I was going to grade it on a scale of 1 to 10, A&M would be a 7.5 and 8 physicality wise. LSU would be a 4 or 5. So the physicality advantage strongly uh, to the one thing I think from a conditioning standpoint, I think LSU's players can play a lot of downs. You know, again, the defense went 90 snaps against Ole Miss, and there was some tiredness, but there was not like, you know, they still competed with, you know, when they were in the 80s and snaps. They almost got off the field there and gave us LSU a shot. They just, Chambliss made a 4th down play. So you know, maybe even a little bit of an advantage from just a total conditioning who, you know, what team can last more plays. LSU. So again, if I was going to rate eight 1 to 10, I would go LSU maybe an 8, A&M maybe a 7 when it comes to just like who, you know, the conditioning factor. But physicality is definitely Texas A&M. Let me add one more thing, and I don't want to hear what you've got on this side. Again, LSU's at 2 losses. Their backs are against the wall. They're playing at home. The crowd's going to be into it. I would expect their coaches, after the way Vandy handled them last weekend from a physical standpoint. That game was a 7-point game, but if you just the physical standpoint, Vandy was much stronger. I would expect LSU's players to be challenged very hard this week, and I'm curious to see how they're going to respond to that. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you in the physicality department. I'd probably put A&M at 8, 8.5 on a 4 to 10. LSU 5 seems really generous. I'm gonna go 4.5 on this one. But I'll tell you, I think Coach Tommy Moffitt's gonna have these guys ready to play at a 12 on the Texas A&M side. Yeah, you know, they're going to be ready for this game. They've never won a game in Death Valley since joining the SEC. And then on the conditioning side, I would give LSU a little bit of an edge here, only because we've seen them play so many plays in so many games this year. My reservation, similar to you, like give LSU an 8, give A&M 7. Not that I don't think A&M could go out and play, you know, 90 plays. We just haven't seen it yet. So I'll give LSU the edge there. So when we break all of this down, A&M quarterback, A&M running back, wide receiver, but it's close. LSU tight end, A&M O-line, defensive end, A&M defensive line, LSU linebackers, A&M cornerback, LSU safety, LSU physicality, Texas A&M. And, you know, outside of the story of, you know, LSU back against the wall, playing at home, Yeah, this game really lines up well for the Texas A&M Aggies. So before we move on to our picks, I want us to each give one more final score prediction in this one. Mine's going to change a bit with the rain factor looking like it may be a little more prominent. So I think I had a 38-17 game the other night on the Tuesday podcast. I'm going to go LSU 17, but I'm going to go Texas A&M 28. So I think A&M still wins this game. I don't think they're going to hit the 30-point mark, and I think they're going to do just enough to beat LSU. I think this is going to be probably a one-score game for, till late. They may score a late touchdown or something. So I don't think LSU is just going to get completely dominated from a scoreboard side of things, probably from a physicality standpoint for sure. But I get Texas A&M 28, LSU 17. Let's hear your final thoughts, Kevin.
Yeah, so again, I just think Death Valley at night and LSU has to win this game. And I think you're going to see them play with more urgency than they have all year, not just within the players, but the coaching staff. I think we'll see more energy and more just will in that staff this weekend. I picked LSU the other night, 27-24. I agree. I'm going to pull back a little bit with the rain, but I'm still going to pick LSU. I'm going to just go 24-20. Look, LSU, that's kind of what they score in these SEC games, right around 20, 24 points. I think, again, LSU's defense is going to get those 2 turnovers, and LSU is going to gut out a win in Death Valley.
So that brings us to our picks of the week. I know we each picked what 3 favorites and 3 underdogs. So I'm gonna let you get things started on both of these tonight.
So let's go under. Well, no, let's go favorites first. So the games that I really like from a favorite standpoint, I'm going to take 3 real quick here. I like Cincinnati minus 3.5 over Baylor, strictly because Cincinnati's defense significantly better points per game than Baylor. They're giving 18 points a game, and Baylor's giving up 31. So, and they're playing at home. And Cincinnati's also undefeated in the Big 12. I don't think they're getting the respect they totally deserve because at the beginning of the season they were not thought to be a contender for that conference. So give me them. Second game that I like from a favorite standpoint is Iowa State at home against BYU. Iowa State's given 2.5. So I'm going to stay in the Big 12 and I'm going to take Iowa State minus 2.5 in this game. BYU's coming off 2 tough weeks. Arizona, they played 2 weeks ago and had to go into overtime and had to come back to get the game into overtime. And then a tough game against a rival this past weekend. So third week in a row, they got to get up and they got to go play on the road. And that's just a tough thing to do. And you're playing Iowa State. Matt Campbell's a very good coach. He coaches sound defense football, which BYU plays sound defense too. But I just think at home, 2.5 point favorite. This is the type of game that Campbell gets his team up and they play for and they win. BYU's undefeated in the Big 12. Iowa State's got 2 losses. Well, Iowa State needs this game. So again, more urgency I think you're going to see there with that Iowa State team. I think they come out really prepared and they win this game. The third game I like on a favorite standpoint is Vanderbilt minus 2.5 at home against Missouri. And this is the game day game this week. I think this is a competitive game. Both these teams are similar. Both teams average 9, 10 possessions a game, and their opponents, 7, 8 possessions a game. Vandy's a positive in the turnover margin. Missouri's a negative too. And so that's where I like the game. I trust Diego Pavia a lot more than I trust Prabula at the quarterback position. I think both teams will have some success running the ball. Missouri's averaging 34 minutes time of possession. Vandy's 31. That is in with a game against Bama where they only had the ball for 22 minutes. So if you take that one anomaly out against Bama, they're going to be right at that 34. So which team is able to establish their running game, time of possession, and get what they want to win it? I trust Pavia more to do that. So I like Vandy minus 2.5. So my 3 favorites: Cincinnati minus 3.5, Iowa State minus 2.5, Vandy minus 2.5. D-Mac, give me your 3 favorites.
Yeah, I'm going to start things off in the ACC this week. Georgia Tech playing host to Syracuse. Tech is a 16.5 point favorite in this one, and I absolutely love the Yellow Jackets laying 16.5. Haynes King is like Diego Pavia in the sense that he's a player. I think he's maybe not as good of a passer, but definitely a better athlete there. Then you look at Syracuse, Ricky Collins stepped in when Steve Angeli went down for the season, and he's played a majority of the snaps. But he got pulled in the third quarter last week, and they went with Luke Carney after Collins threw two early interceptions. And then two drives later, they're right back to Ricky Collins. So they've got some serious quarterback problems. So I'm going to take Georgia Tech in this one to cover the 16.5. Now I'm going to the SEC for my final two picks. Give me the Texas A&M Aggies to cover 2.5. I know I just predicted the score a few minutes ago. I think the physicality that Texas A&M brings behind their strength coach, Coach Tommy Moffitt's going to be too much for the Tigers in this one. And then let's go to Alabama traveling to South Carolina. I bought into Beamer Ball a little bit. I'll be honest. I thought, they were going to be much improved. I think they still play Beamer Ball a little bit because they score most of their touchdowns with defense and special teams. So they're still serviceable in those categories. But Bama is an 11.5 point favorite on the road. Ty Simpson's firmly in contention for the Heisman Trophy. So I think he's going to have a really big game where Bama scores 38 to 2 points. And I just don't think that South Carolina could score 30. That would require a couple special teams and defensive touchdowns that they're not going to get against the Crimson Tide. So give me A&M minus 2.5, Georgia Tech minus 16.5, and the Crimson Tide minus 11.5. So that brings us to the underdogs. Kevin, tell us who you've got.
Yeah, so before I get into those, I gotta agree with you on Bama. I really like that game. I don't know how it's 11.5. All right, so getting into the underdogs. So let me start with the game I like the most, and I'll tell you the why on this one. So Oklahoma and Ole Miss. Oklahoma has four offensive linemen hurt, and their starting right tackle, who managed to play against South Carolina, got dinged up against Texas, but he's listed doubtful in this game. So they were able to run the ball against South Carolina. South Carolina doesn't have the best run defense. Of course, Oklahoma doesn't either. But I think with having that many offensive linemen out, and Derek Simmons is your right tackle that is listed as doubtful in this game. If he doesn't play, I just think they're going to struggle to run the ball. And Ole Miss, even though Oklahoma's a really good defense, Kiffin calls plays as good as anybody, and Ole Miss is really good offensively. So you got the number 8 offense going against, the number 1 or 2 defense. I just think Ole Miss is going to get 27 points, 25, 27. And with the struggles that they have on the offensive line, I just don't see Oklahoma getting to maybe 20. So Oklahoma is favored by 5.5. I think Ole Miss wins the game, but I definitely think they cover the 5.5. Second game I like is Iowa Minnesota. So the game is in Iowa, but Minnesota's getting 7.5. I really like how Minnesota's playing. They started out the season passing the ball well. I like their young quarterback and Drake Lindsay. He's a very gutsy guy that plays well, kind of in the same mold as Pavia and Haynes King. He's just younger. And the last couple of weeks, Minnesota's run the ball better. So I think this is a battle that goes down to 3 or 4 point game either way. Minnesota might be able to pull off the upset. If I had to pick a winner, I would probably pick Iowa. But this is going to be a low scoring battle. Minnesota's defense is also playing well. Of course, Iowa's defense is always plays well. So I think this will be like a 17 to 13 point game. So getting 7.5 points in this game, I like Minnesota and PJ Fleck. And look, if he wins this game, they'll be 6-2, and there's going to be a lot of jobs open. Last game I like is this is a team that started out the season just absolutely awful, but since they made a coaching change, they're 3-0, and that's UCLA. They're getting 25.5 on the road to Indiana. Indiana's a good team. Look, I expect Indiana to win this game 17, 20 points. I don't expect UCLA to threaten, even though they won their last 3 in a row. I just think Jerry Neuheisel's done such a good job with their offense. He's got Nico playing well at quarterback, and before that, he just was not. So I think UCLA will be able to put 17, 20 points on the board, and that'll cover the 25 and a half points that they're getting in this game. Still expect Indiana to win, but 25 and a half points is a lot when you look at how well their offense is playing. So DMAC, give me your three underdog.
Yeah, we're gonna start in the ACC again with this one. Stanford travels to Miami. They are getting 30.5 points. Miami's coming off a loss and Stanford's coming off a huge win. So I'm gonna roll with Stanford getting the 30.5 this week. I think they're too good to get beat by 30. Now a three-score game wouldn't surprise me in this one, but I think they're better than the 30.5 point line. Next, I'm going up against one of your favorites. I'm going to roll with Missouri in this one. I think Ahmad Hardy has a really good chance to get things going early in Vanderbilt. LSU showed some ability to run against Vanderbilt. I think Missouri gets the ball moving on the ground and gets a win in Nashville. Lastly, I'm sticking in the SEC. You get Texas traveling to Mississippi State. Mississippi State's a 6.5 point dog at home. It's going to be electric in Stark Vegas. The cowbells are going to be going, and I'm following the same philosophy I followed in baseball with Missouri. Keep betting them in conference games because they're eventually going to win one. So I'm following that same philosophy with Mississippi State football. They're too good not to get a win at some point. So give me Blake Shapen leading this offense to a win. And if we're talking quarterback trust, I trust Blake Shapen more at this moment than I trust Arch Manning to lead an offense. So those are my three underdogs of the week to cover, but I think two of those three in Mississippi State and Missouri actually win the game they're playing. Any last thoughts on picks, Kevin?
Yeah, so I like the Mississippi State pick a lot. Again, I think Ole Miss wins outright, and I kind of am with you. I think Mississippi State probably wins out in that game against Texas. Arch has had one good game this year, and again, I see Mississippi State winning that game. They're going to be up for this game, so I like them. The spread started at 7.5, it's down to 6.5. So the public seems to like Mississippi State in this game. So that's it for picks for me. The last thing I'll mention just for the night, I'm going to just touch on Georgia high school football here just for a second. Last week, I mentioned the Northgate Langston Hughes game. Close game for the first half. Northgate really battled, had a chance to be up and at half it was down by a field goal. Langston Hughes, very physical team, just wore them down. Second half, won by 20. And that brings me to the point of in Class 6A, the highest classification in Georgia high school football. There's 5, 6 teams that have really emerged to me that are going to be the teams that play for the state championship. And that's Grayson won it last year. They're ranked number one. Great defensive team coming around on offense. It's definitely the number one team, but the margin there is not as wide as it was at the beginning of the season. Buford's number two. The younger Rayola is playing quarterback for them. Great defense for Buford. And if Rayola plays well, they could be a team that wins the state. Carrollton's the third best team. A few weeks ago, they went to Gainesville and won by 21, and Gainesville is the fourth best team in the state. Carrollton's defense is really good this year. I think again they're a contender. Last year they went to the state championship game. They beat Buford in the semifinals, so they're up there again. So your top three teams all were in the semifinals last year, and I would expect all three of them to be in the semifinals this year. Then you have Gainesville, really really good team. Their only loss is to Carrollton, and they've been pretty dominant. They won at Milton a couple of weeks ago by double digits. So that Gainesville team is the fourth team that I think is really good in contention. And then the fifth team, again, I would have to mention Langston Hughes. They're undefeated. All these teams are undefeated with the exception of Gainesville's one loss being to the third ranked team in Carrollton. So to me, those 5 teams have just become dominant in Georgia high school football. So I know I didn't include any of those teams in the southern part of the state, the Valdostas, the Colquitt counties, and Oconee and those type of teams. But that's where I'm going to roll, and I think when you get to that semifinal round, it's going to be really, really good games against some talented teams. And look, those 5 teams all have a lot of guys that are going to be playing on in major college football next year. Your final thoughts for the week, D Matt?
Yeah, I did a ton of good games, especially in the AC or SEC. I know a couple games we haven't even talked about. We talked about them on Tuesday, but a couple games that I'm really excited to see here. I'm excited to see this Auburn Arkansas game. I think that's going to be a really good game. Good chance for Arkansas to get their first win of the season in conference play, and I think this may be the final nail in the coffin of Hugh Freeze down in Auburn. He asked for a vote of confidence from the AD this week, and to my knowledge, there's been no response from Cohen. I think that the Auburn football program has just been, as much as they wanted Gus Malzahn gone a couple years ago, it's been in complete disarray. I would say the most stable time since Gus left was when you had Cadillac Williams running things as an interim coach. So they're not in a great position. So that's my final thoughts. We're going to push our team draft to Tuesday's podcast when we've got Sweets back to make it a little more interesting to where there has to be 12 teams taken. Get us thinking a little more creatively as well. So that's all that I've got. So thanks for joining us on the Thursday night pod, everybody who's going to listen to this, and we'll see you Saturday night or Sunday morning for a Week 9 recap, and we'll break down some of the awesome games upcoming this weekend. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, and share our videos. Thanks.